Hey all, so before we begin, I have a few things to say. First, if it wasn't obvious, this is a collaboration video. Joining me today is a YouTuber named Hippo Talks. He's pretty new to the scene, even newer than I. It was a pleasure working with him on this, and he's really got some narrating and commentating talent. So please, go to his channel and show him some love. The link is in the description below. So anyways, let's begin.
A few years ago, my parents and I were staying at their condo in Miami, Florida for 2 to 3 weeks. One day, I decided to go to a shopping area known as Lincoln Road to see a movie. In the course of the movie, I noticed my phone vibrating. Without thinking, I answered it. I don't know why I did that. I'm very aware that it's rude and inconsiderate to do so. Suddenly, some guy who seemed to be on the older side started to hit me. I, taken by surprise, blocked him by putting my forearm out in a horizontal position to stop him from reaching my face or body. I took karate as a kid. I ended the call and ran out of the theater. I didn't think to report it at the time. I don't know why, maybe it was just the shock of the whole thing. Thankfully, he didn't follow me. That was the only time I ever talked on the phone during a movie. Well, what I did was inconsiderate. That gave this jerk no right to physically assault me. Last summer, my 3-year-old daughter and I were wandering around the store. She's sitting in the cart, mesmerized by the new coloring supplies I promised her. So with her good mood in tow, we took our time browsing the shelves. At first, I noticed him out of the corner of my eye. It wasn't his demeanor or his odd appearance that grabbed my attention. It wasn't even the fact that he was wearing a huge winter coat in the middle of a hot and humid summer day. It was his voice. It was a low, deep, almost soothing voice, but his soft words were directed at my daughter. I thought at first he was simply saying hi to a child as he passed, looking for something. He stared at her, looking at her in a way that made me feel uncomfortable. Quickly, I pushed the cart away from the man and silently tried to suppress the suspicious feeling I had, dismissing him as someone who was most likely harmless. As we continued to travel up and down the aisle, I noticed him time and time again, but hey, it's a grocery store. And who am I to question someone else's need for peanut butter, Cheerios, apple juice, crackers, and fruit snacks? Then, as I mentally check off all my items, I realized I just walked back. I walked past exactly what I needed. So, I turned back and walked the 10 feet to grab the forgotten item. As I go to return to my girl in her cart, there he is, speaking to her again. I walk up in full mama bear mode and ask him what his problem was. He says something about how sweet or cute she is. Honestly, I couldn't tell you because my mind was focused on him, his dirty appearance and his hands reaching out to touch her angelic face. I probably looked crazy, and the truth is, I don't really care. All I know is there was something not right about him, so, hey, guy in aisle 4, let's not meet again. Hello, I haven't been on this site for very long, but I thought it would be a good place to share my story. This all happened to me around 7 years ago, when I was 9 years old. My mom had been single for 9 years, and she raised me and my older sister alone. Until one night she went out with a few friends and met a guy called John, who is now my stepdad. Anyway, me, my sister, and my mom would go over to John's house often, and sleep at his house, as we lived 2 hours away from each other and we had no way to get home at night. One night I remember we stayed at his house. His bed was downstairs, so I slept in one of the upstairs rooms. This room was fairly empty as John lived alone, and the only use for this room was to put some DVDs in. I slept on a blow-up mattress in the corner of the room, with a window right behind me. This window didn't have any curtains or blinds of any type, so all the cars drove past lit up the room and made it very hard to sleep. One night, I lay awake. It must have been 3 in the morning, and I couldn't sleep. This is when I heard the sharp noises of what sounded like something hitting off the window. As soon as it happened, once, I froze. I hoped that it was just something that could be explained and wasn't anything serious, but then it happened again. It sounded like small rocks bouncing off the glass. Because I was only 9 at the time, I felt pretty curious. It seems stupid now, but I very slowly tried to peek through the window, still very much terrified. I couldn't see anything at first. It was pitch black and the nearest street lamp was down the street. I put my head close to the window. Suddenly I saw a rock being thrown straight at the window. I gasped and fell back, absolutely terrified. For some reason I got up again. Just as a car was going down the street, I could see him this time. He was a small man. He had dark eyes and a frown which made him look really angry. And he was staring right at me. I screamed and ran away from the window to the back of the room. My mom came running up the stairs to ask what was wrong, and I pointed to the window. She looked and there was nobody there. And she told me it was just a nightmare. I slept in my sister's room that night. The next morning I woke up and still remembered everything that happened. I was hungry and we had nothing to eat in the house, so we went to the local store. This is when I was almost kidnapped. My mom went to buy some cereal and I hung back to look at some magazines. I glanced behind me and saw the same man staring at me. I froze and didn't know what to do. He started to walk towards me with the same frown he had last night. He grabbed me and was about to take me out of the store when suddenly my mom stepped out from behind the shelf, saw what he was doing, and punched him in the face. He fell to the floor and started growling like a cat. The shop owners called the police, and it turns out the man was a convicted child molester. I have never been back to that area of town again. When I was about 18, I worked as a nursing assistant on a surgical floor. We got a range of patients that varied from gallbladders to knee replacements. I worked with another assistant and we split the floor in half. She got one hallway and I got the other. She went on break, so I responded to the call lights in both halls. One of their patients rung out, so I went to help. The lady's son stepped out while I assisted her to the bedside commode. I came out and told him I was done and he could go back. Instead, he chose to talk to me. We exchanged some small talk and he went back into the room when his mother called for him. The other assistant came back and I continued working. I went to the chart at the nurse's station and the son came out and began chatting with me again. I didn't think much of it. It was the middle of the night. Nothing good was on TV at this time and I assumed he was just bored. I got up to attend my patients, and he followed me, asking lots of questions. How old I was, if I was going to school, how long I had worked there. He even waited outside a patient's room until I came out. I should have mentioned earlier that this guy did not have the usual creeper vibe. He was clean-cut guy, perhaps in late 20s. He was charming and funny. I guess his appearance delayed my creeper sense, and I dismissed it as him being socially awkward. He continued to follow me and talk to me, and I tried to drop subtle hints that I had a boyfriend, although I didn't. Towards the end of my shift, he became a little more aggressive. He told me, well, guess I'll have to kill him. Referring to my boyfriend, I spoke about it. He said it with a laugh and then told me he would walk me to my car when my shift was over. He then left to check on his mother. At this point, I was creeped out. It was the end of my shift, and we gave report to the day shift assistants. I told my coworker what had happened with the son, and she checked the hallway before we left, and we took a little known path to the parking garage. I went to bed when I got home, and around noon, the day shift charge nurse called me. She told me not to come in. She said the son had been asking about me. He asked when I worked, what my real name was, I put a nickname on my badge, and more personal info. When she wouldn't tell him, he asked other nurses. His mom was going home that day, she said. so I could probably come back tomorrow. Tomorrow came and my manager called. She told me to stay home the rest of the week. The son had sent flowers to the floor and called every floor asking about me. And when I worked, she said she didn't feel like it was safe for me to come back. Eventually he quit calling and I came back to work. About 3 months later, I was watching the news. He had been arrested for rape and murder. So, creepy son, let's not meet again. Last night I was taking a night off to relax and watch Netflix. Every day for the past 2 weeks, I've been busy with my school's musical. As a tech manager, I've been through hell and back with this stupid show, and was looking forward to a night off before opening week of the show. However, with my luck, that was not the case. I was home alone watching Broadchurch Season 2 on Netflix when I heard the doorbell ring. My friend Jack had come to pick something up about 5 minutes earlier, so I just assumed he forgot something here. Now, my friend never bothered my dog at all, so when I noticed the hound literally foaming at the mouth, ready to attack, I knew something was up. I hesitantly opened the door to see an older man, about 45 to 50 years old, wearing a black jacket, cargo pants, and black leather boots. It was a cold, rainy night, which made every hair on my body stand up, and I almost immediately started shaking with fear. I knew something wasn't right. As soon as I opened the door, he started demanding to speak to a woman whose husband used to live here. We had to kick him out due to his criminal activity. At this point, the only thing I could think of was Russian mob. The large Russian man never looked at me. His focus was behind me into my house. I panicked and told him I didn't know the name, and told him he had the wrong address. Then closed the door. I then returned to my basement, where the safe haven of Netflix was. Then my dog started freaking out again. I ran back up the stairs. I found this more annoying than creepy at this point, but then looked at the window. Sure enough, I saw the Russian man looking through the window into my living room. His eyes met mine, and he simply walked away like nothing happened. I, on the other hand, wasted no time. I grabbed my stuff out of the basement, and I ran upstairs to my room to phone my parents. Told them what was going on, and then saw him standing at the edge of my lawn looking up at my second floor window. I guess he saw me on the phone and decided it was a good time to leave. He hopped in his Honda Civic and drove away. A wave of relief swept over me like a cool wind on a hot summer day. After telling my parents he had gone, they instructed me to phone the police if he came back. As those words left my stepmother's mouth, I saw the same car pull back in front of my house for the second time that night. I ran to my bedroom door to lock it. I saw him walk towards my house and then abruptly freeze. There's a large window on my front door with a bright light behind it, from the lizard cage. So when I saw the large dog's shadow on the lawn, followed by the sound of a near rabid barking and growling, I had an idea why he may have been hesitant to come closer to the house. I phoned 911 as soon as I stopped shaking enough to dial. They told me that there would be no police able to come for at least 30 to 40 minutes, but to call back if he decided to try to break in. This worried me, but I felt safe enough to wait due to the dog already making this guy shit his pants with fear. So I thanked the 911 operator and let her hang up first. I was always told by my mom to let the operator hang up first. Not that it's relevant, but I'd like you to take something potentially useful away from this story. As I waited, the guy drove off again, this time extremely slow with his headlights off. Needless to say, I did not expect him to stay gone. He came back no more than 2 minutes later, but this time he didn't go into my yard. Or so I thought. I noticed him walk around my neighbor's house, and if I didn't know who he was actually looking for, I'd think he had the wrong address in the first place, but I knew better. I ran out of my room into my parents' room and peered through the blinds to see him looking over our fence, trying to open the gate. Once again, I heard my dog go nuts, and once again, this guy looked like he just shit himself. He went back to his car after that. As he was heading to the car, he took one last minute stare into my second floor bedroom window from the lawn. He sat in his car for about 10 minutes after that, then left. He pulled away for the last time that night. He basically pulled away as my parents pulled up. Good timing because my dad was ready to beat him to death. The police showed up about an hour after I called 911 initially. My stepmom said that our old roommate, the husband of the woman this creep was looking for, missed a meeting that day, and that this probably had something to do with it. I'm just glad this dude was terrified of my dog. I've never loved this dog more in my life. The police weren't much help, but he didn't show up again after that. I just want to say 2 things to this Russian creep. 1, fuck you for ruining my night off. And 2, let's never meet again. Update. So our old roommate attempted suicide today. We're almost certain it's related to this incident. If it is, then this Russian guy must mean some serious business, if our old roommate would rather die than confront him. Seriously, this entire situation is getting more fucked up by the hour.
I'm a guy who lives in Brooklyn, New York City, in a neighborhood known as Bensonhurst, which is only about an hour away from Manhattan by train and even less by car. It's a fairly safe neighborhood, but it's surrounded by some shady areas like Borough Park to the north and Gravesend to the southeast. My neighborhood itself has had its days of violence here and there, even though hilariously enough it's also bordered by the Dyker Heights to the west, which is known as the safest neighborhood in Brooklyn. But anyways, I'm a native New Yorker, born and raised here, and living in this rough city all your life. I ended up growing up with thick skin and a sharp tongue that would have left most people's self-esteem in ruins, as many other New Yorkers do. This will be relevant later, as growing up in the city such as this leaves you not being scared easily. These experiences, however, are the exception. I have no photographs or anything to serve as proof about what am I talking about my past experiences, but I swear on every fiber of my being that everything I'm about to tell you is 100% true. This first story happened in 2005 when I was about 11 or 12 years old. I was at home playing GTA San Andreas like basically every teenager at the time. It's one of the best games ever in my opinion. In the living room of the apartment, which I lived with my mom and sister, since I don't come from a very rich family. This is important because the door to the apartment was to the immediate left of my bed at the time. When playing the game, my mom, who was cooking in the kitchen to my right, and myself heard some weird banging and scraping noises in the hallway outside of the apartment. Curious as to what was going on, my mom decided to check out what was happening through the peephole of our door. I would later hear some loud, angry yelling, and then immediately somebody running down the stairs and out of the building. A few hours later, we get a knock at our door. It's a Mexican neighbor from across the hall from us, and she was crying and shaking, with the cops talking to somebody behind her. My mom lets her in so she could calm down, and I even stopped playing my game because I genuinely felt bad for her. She had this look of terror that was almost contagious. Eventually, after a few hours, she thanked us and went back to her apartment. My mom told me that what happened was that she saw some guy trying to break into our neighbor's door, but then was scared away by a Spanish lady who turned out to be my neighbor's mother. However, this is not where the story ends. The next day, after coming home from school, I was just about to put the key into the door to open it when I happened to look back at my neighbor's door. I saw something on the door, and when I stepped over to see what it was, cliche as it sounds, my heart stopped. That fucking guy scratched a phrase saying,
"I will get you,"
into her door. Needless to say, she and her mom moved out about a week later. As far as I know, this guy was never caught. The second story happened between the late winter and spring of 2012. My apartment building had recently been purchased by a new landowner and was undergoing a much needed renovation, since it was an old building that was built sometime in the 20s. This is relevant due to the fact that construction workers would sometimes foolishly leave the front door of the building wide open with the lock removed, which allowed trespassers to waltz right in. I, again, was home, now 18 years old, in college, snowed in the middle of the winter. I was watching episodes of The Daily Show with Jon Stewart on Hulu on my bed in the same living room previously mentioned, when I heard the sound of keys jiggling near the door and the sound of a key going through the lock. Thinking it was my mom who was coming home from work, I thought nothing of it, until the sound persisted. Confused, I called out, "Mom?" The sound stopped, but persisted again. I called out again, "Mom, do you need help?" The sound still persisted. Again, the door was to my immediate left from my bed, so I was beginning to get a bit unnerved and suspicious. I very quietly got up from my bed and went up to the peephole to see some Asian guy trying to pick the door lock. I could feel my thyroid swell with adrenaline, and I started thinking fast, while still being admittedly scared shitless as well. I hastily went into the kitchen and grabbed a knife, and then stomped towards the door, not hiding my presence anymore. Before I could even do anything, I heard him bolting down the stairs. Funny thing about the apartment door, though, the door had 3 locks on it, 2 of which were broken and not actually used to lock the door. I guess he didn't notice the lock towards the bottom below the other 2 locks, which were bigger, so luck was on my side here. However, the story doesn't end there. A few months later, there's now scaffolding around the inner courtyard of the apartment building, where workers were now re-bricking and repainting the facade of the side of our building. The scaffolding was so thorough that it is basically near up against the windows of the building. This will be important later. My mom and I had now moved downstairs to a newly renovated apartment downstairs, and it was now spring. One night, my mom looked out from the window for our new kitchen and quickly killed the lights. I joined in quietly to see what was going on, and I see a cop with a flashlight looking around the courtyard, around the scaffolding, and I notice him picking up a wallet from the ground. He radios in, and I swear, I could have sworn I saw the light from his flashlight showed a splat of blood on the ground. I didn't know about this until the very end of the year, but my Italian neighbor who lived in this building since the 80s, and now lived across from the hall from me, told me some junkie used the scaffolding around the building to get to her window and that he was trying to break in. Thankfully, the windows were locked, and she happened to be sleeping near that very window, so she caught him quickly. The guy tried to make a run for it, but ended falling a good 20 to 30 feet onto the hard concrete and limped away. He was found by police in the corner of my block, which he had died from his injuries. She and I both think he was likely the same guy who tried to lockpick my door just months before. The final story I'm going to share here happened during the early spring of 2011, and this is one of the most horrifying experiences in my entire life. I was 17 years old at the time and still in high school as a senior. I was hanging out with a girl whom I was friends with benefits with at the time, and well, long story, we hung around Coney Island for a bit, and then we went back to her apartment and did the dirty deed. Aside from the sex, we were really close friends though. After we were done, she decided to walk me to the train station, which was the Bay 50th train station on the D line. This, again, will be very important later, as the train station is deep in a part of Gravesend where there's a lot of blood and crip activity. That's Brooklyn for you. Anyway, she and I kissed each other goodbye and we went our separate ways for the night. I walked up the stations, wiped my MetroCard, and walked through the turnstiles. I see these 2 big black guys and one of them intentionally bumps into me. Nowadays, I would have just ignored it, but my dumb 17-year-old brain, still drunk on testosterone and dopamine from the earlier mentioned fuck session, made me yell, "Yo, what the fuck, man?" Mind you, I was 6'4" at the time, and these guys still towered over me. And I'm also white in a mostly black neighborhood at the moment, which wasn't out of the ordinary for me since I'm originally from the Lower East Side of Manhattan. But that was likely why I was targeted, maybe. After a short little altercation, I just gave them the finger and went upstairs to the platform to get on my train. For some reason, I decided to go to the darker southern edge of the platform where it was dimly lit so I could see the view of Coney Island and the parachute jump against the dying sunset. It was a beautiful sight, and I swear, I thank myself every day for going to see the view from a part of that station I literally never stood at, because of what happened next. I heard one of the guys coming up the stairs from about 40 to 60 feet away, saying,
"So, you want to talk shit now, huh? Where are you?"
I swiftly but quietly ran to hide behind a big garbage can from them, with the darkness of the night and the lack of the lighting completely shielding me. What I saw, though, as I went to go hide, still gives me shivers and scares me to this day. The guy now had a fucking gun, and so did his friend. I'm atheist, but thank fucking God that they decided to check the opposite and more well-lit part of the station, the spot where I usually am while waiting for the train. Oh, fuck, I think to myself. They were gonna rob me at the very least, but their tone sounded predatory. My fight-or-flight response is now screaming, leaning more towards flight, because you don't fight unarmed against 2 armed guys. You just don't. My fear is almost quickly mixed with sadness due to the fact that I had lied to my mom about being at my high school and taking care of a few things with school. So I was thinking to myself, my mom is never going to find me, most likely. Same with my sister. They think I'm at school. Oh shit! The guys are now almost at the other edge of the station. I had to think fast. I couldn't run to the stairs and bolt out of the station because they would definitely hear me and would likely chase me down. By some fucking massive stroke of luck, I could see the Coney Island bound D train approaching the station far in the distance, about 2 or 3 minutes away. However, I was on the Manhattan bound side of the station, the opposite side from where the D train was coming. Cornered with no rational solution, I decided to go with the only irrational thing I could think of. I decided to go down the tracks and climb about 4 lanes worth of them so I could get onto the other platform across from where I was at and onto the train that was arriving. One thing about this station though, it's an elevated station where the tracks are about 50 to 70 feet above the ground. The tracks have an electrified third rail that can kill anything living that touches it. I don't know how I managed to climb over the traps without falling to my death, tripping, touching the third rail, or even without getting caught by the armed thugs or the train workers nearby. But I managed to, and the train came just in time. I had escaped death by an inch, but I wasn't fully out of the woods yet. I was now heading towards Coney Island, the final stop on the D train, and opposite of where I'm supposed to go. I could have just stayed on the train and waited for it to go the other way, but I was scared that the guys would search the train for me. So I transferred to the N train and hightailed it back to my neighborhood. My parents still don't know about this nearly happening to me that day, and I had never seen those guys again. It's really amazing what the human mind can do when you're really pushed and scared. When I told my friends about it a few months later, she thunderslapped me dead in the face. And honestly, I fully deserved it. I could have easily gotten myself killed and caused my friends and family unbelievable pain. Take it from a New Yorker, please don't get yourself killed over stupid shit. And always be aware of your surroundings. Stay safe, everybody.